Today's episode is sponsored by Tectonic Tourists. Do you need a van or equipment to go on tour? Tectonic Tourists has you covered. Large, reliable vans and great sounding equipment that bands like Metz, City of Caterpillar, Page 99, Chain Cult, Soul Glow, Infant Island, Soft Kill, and many more have used to tour and play all over North America. If you have a tour coming up, go to tectonictourist.com. Tectonic, like tectonic plates. Tectonic, tourist.com. Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and I've had a really busy week this week, making zines, doing drums for a new project, and all kinds of other things. And you know what? The best way that you can keep up to date with stuff like that is to join the Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine, where you can get updates with exclusive music and read all of the zines that we've made. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing We Will Not Wither and Die by Analecta, featuring my pal Sarah Maloney on guitar, bass, and other noises. Well, it's a whole thing. Stay tuned and you'll find out what I mean.
I never had anybody make mixtapes for me. I made mixtapes for myself when I was in high school off the radio, but nobody ever made any for me.
Okay. What would go on yours? Like mine, they would have all kinds of stuff, but it felt like there was always one song that was on like every single one that I had made people or made for myself or, you know, whatever. Like what was on yours?
So mine were hard to catch because they were often bands that didn't get much radio play. So Hum was definitely very high on the list.
Okay.
Because mid to late 90s, so.
Mm-hmm. And you would catch that on like a college station or?
So where I grew up, there were 3 different rock stations and they all played different styles.
Okay.
So there was one that was like the mainstream. There was one that was more the indie and had like specialized time slots for unknown bands or lesser known bands. And then one that did like new metal and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And where was that you grew up?
I grew up just outside Boston.
Oh, okay. So you're not like...
I'm a transplant to the Midwest.
Okay. Well, it's all good. I know you've been here probably, I mean, not necessarily as long as I have, but I know you've been here since like 2010 or whatever. So
I moved to the Midwest in 99.
Oh, okay. So you have been here as long as I have.
Yep. I started going to shows and playing in bands in 2000 and going to local shows specifically in 2001.
And has that been the South Bend area the whole time or?
Yeah, I used to live about half an hour to 40 minutes north of South Bend. But it was always a South Bend-based scene.
Mm-hmm. And what brought you here in the first place?
College.
Okay, so did you go to Ball State or like I forget what's up there. Sorry.
I went to a private Christian college.
Oh, okay. And that was something that was on your radar from all the way in Boston, like this town, this college in this town in Indiana?
So my parents met at the college that I went to. And it's specifically a denominational college. And so it was the denomination that I grew up in. And so it just seemed normal at the time to go to that college. So I did. And just kind of organically found the local scene on my own. And for a long time, I was just going to shows by myself because I didn't know anybody else. And people that I went to school with were not into the same music that I was.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if that was not the case. But like
I was
considering,
definitely an outlier on my campus.
yeah, yeah. How did you start? Like, you're going to shows by yourself, and like they're local, so it's not like necessarily. It's not you're going to a show with 1,000 people or whatever. It's maybe like 100 people or something. So,
Oh yeah.
how did you start ingratiating yourself in the scene, like as it were, to where you know, were started actually playing and forming bands and stuff?
So I think it was more the bands came first. Um, and there was a big like youth group music scene around here for a long time that's largely gone now. Um, and so I got enough people together to play music that was more like what I wanted to play because my first band was just to be in a band. It wasn't a style necessarily that I wanted to play, but um, it just allowed me to be playing. So that got my foot in the door, as it were, and then formed a side project off of that that actually started playing more regionally. Um, and that was how I met people, was through being in a band.
Yeah. What was that first band like? Like, what could you
Um,
compare it to?
the guitarist wanted it to be more like thrice post-hardcore kind of stuff, and I was leaning more towards the scram stuff, but you can only push some people so far on what you're doing. So it ended up being a weird mishmash of stuff.
Yeah. Do you think, like, do you have any of that stuff laying around that you have
Um,
listened to recently?
Not, no, I
Oh,
haven't listened
okay.
to any of it in a long time, and a
Okay.
lot of it's like rough demos at best.
Okay. Sometimes it's like it's weird how you can listen to something and you're like, well, for where we were and in our like musical progression or whatever, like this isn't too bad. And then sometimes it's just like, no, this was just
Oh yeah.
horrible.
The first 4 or 5 years of playing in bands is stuff that I prefer not to go back to. Once I hit 2006, though, that's about when things really shifted.
Yeah. See, I asked that question too because I was thinking about my first band. When you said that people wanted this band to be different things, and my first band was very much like every single person in this band wanted it to be different things. Like the bass player wanted it to be Primus, and the guitar player, like the other guitar player, just like worshipped Randy Rhoads, right? And like we had like a through line in sort of like the earlier Metallica stuff that everybody kind of was into that, but I was like not trying to do that. Even I liked the Adolescents and the Descendants and stuff.
Yeah.
And I have like some stuff from bands of mine after that I either have a tape and I'll put 2 seconds of it on, just when I come across it and be like, for 16-year-old kids, this isn't in bad. Like there's 16-year-old people right now like ripping shit up. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
So like I feel like that is it's hard to be mean to myself, like being like, wow, the 16-year-old people make like absolutely timeless music these days, because like we didn't have the access,
Yeah.
that everybody like. I when I started playing guitar, I couldn't go online and like and see how people were playing guitar. Like I had to learn
Right.
it.
That wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah, yeah. So like my long, winded thing is like I try not to be too mad about it, but that very first thing, I can't remember what that band sounded like, and I don't have a tape of it. There were like we made 20 tapes in my bedroom.
Right.
And I'm just like, I wonder if that was like good in a super weird way. And it probably wasn't, but like that's the mystery, right?
Right.
But like it could have been like, whoa, this is kind of like what this weird band was trying to do, but did well like years later or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, like I'm probably like, every time I play some punk guitar or whatever, I'm probably like half rewriting some of those riffs subconsciously. So whatever. But yeah, like you said, 2006 was kind of a turning point for you. But let's go back, like as far as like when did you actually start playing an instrument, and was it guitar or was it
Oh
something
no,
else?
I started on piano in second grade,
Okay.
and took 4 years of piano, and then 2 years in, I started clarinet, and I played clarinet for about 12 years.
Okay.
And in high school, I got this idea that I wanted to be in a band, but I went to a private Christian school, and there was one band, and there wasn't enough people for another band. And so I just, like, my dad had an acoustic guitar sitting in the guest room for as long as I could remember. And I asked him if I could borrow it because it was just sitting there. And he's like, whatever, you can just have it. So I taught myself how to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to college, I was jamming with a friend, and he was like, oh, I'm in this other band and we don't have a bass player. And I was like, okay, well, if I borrow some gear, can I come try out? So
Yeah.
I played dedicated bass for several years.
Yeah. And what did you think about like the difference between like playing guitar and playing bass?
I tend to play bass like a guitarist.
Yeah. So like a lot of chords and stuff like that.
Chords and stuff that's like, I like to be complementary to the guitarist rather than just root. I mean, there's a time and place for the root, but I think that it's more interesting when you're like riffing with the guitar player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's more interesting for me as a musician.
Yeah. You don't get bored. You're like doing something different, and having fun. I love to play bass, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't do anything on guitar or bass like consciously. I feel like it's all just like it like I don't like I believe that the muse exists, you know what I mean? But I don't believe in like waiting for it to strike you or whatever. I believe that you have to pick up the guitar to make guitar stuff happen. So this isn't like that necessarily, but like when it comes to like what I come up with like on bass, like it's very much just like my brain is like figuring out how the song goes, and then something interrupts my brain and is like, but try this. Otherwise I'm kind of just rooting around, if that makes sense. I wish I was more conscious. Like sometimes I am, but I am in a way that I feel like I'm supposed to be fighting what feels obvious, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Like, and that's something I was going to ask you about later, but it's something that I've observed in a lot of y'all's songs is that they're, in a lot of post rock, like I feel like there's tons of it out there, and I don't listen to enough of it to make generalized statements. So take this like how it is.
I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes about post rock that are there for a reason.
For sure, right? But like what I was gonna say is, I found what y'all do is you'll have something, you'll have a large piece of the movement that's going a particular way, and then like in the middle of a chord progression or whatever, you take a sort of a hard swerve from what I was expecting. Is that you doing what I was describing, which is like being like, now like it's kind of feels right or natural or expected or whatever to go this way, to like from this C or whatever it is to go to this G or whatever. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to this, like, I don't know,
So a lot of we try and write largely collaboratively between the two of us, which is a lot of us sitting around just playing. and not even talking about it. We'll play for 15, 20 minutes and then go, okay, well, there was some little chunks here and there, and we like those. So let's revisit those and see what's going on. And if we still like them, and can we mash them together with other things? But we both come from, I mean, we both listen to post-rock, but we're not, like, that's not our main thing. And so we're pulling more from other genres to write post-rock, and so the expected is not usually what we want.
Mm-hmm. What is your main thing that you're like?
So I'm for distilling it down to like the very the easiest way is I'm more of a metalhead.
Okay.
And Patrick is more of a punk. And
Okay.
we both listen to we both like hardcore, we both like metal. I'm kind of hit or miss on punk, really. We often tell people that as a band, our biggest influences are Pink Floyd and Nine Inch Nails.
Okay.
Because we don't tend to draw influence from other post-rock bands. I just was at Postfest this last weekend and watching all these bands and going, well, some of these bands are amazing and I love them. We don't sound like any of these, and I'm really glad about that, and I don't want to sound like them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, I'm not as versed in that particular genre or whatever as like I do like to put on like I do like to put on like a YouTube or something of like This Will Destroy You or Tristeza or something, and then like when I'm writing or when I'm drawing, because it's like
I need to go back to Tristeza because there's some like punk roots to that band that I wasn't aware of until recently.
Didn't?
Yeah, somehow I didn't know that guy was the original synth player for the Locust.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a game changer for me, and I need to go back because I really like what he's doing solo.
And the album leaf and stuff.
Yeah, the album leaf is great. I love it.
Yeah.
I had no idea that's where he came from.
Yeah, there's a podcast I listen to, like, I'll tell the story real briefly, but long story short, when Tristeza came out, they did a European tour, and he talks about how one of the first shows they played in, like, in not Germany, but, like, you know, some Eastern European country. Yeah. People, they start playing, like, the first song, and people were throwing shit at them and screaming at them, like, oof, we want the Locust, you know, or whatever.
Right.
So the drummer, they just, like, look at the drummer, and they're just like, fuck it, like, let's go, like, just count something off. And they just, like, just did an improvised, like, noise screamo set where they just screamed, and the drummer played, you know, violently, and they all just banged on their guitars, and the crowd turned around, and then they bought all these Tristeza records. And
even though they sounded nothing like the record.
Yeah, I mean, they I don't know, you know, I don't know what the thing there was, like, if people were like, oh, that's what they really sound like, and then they bought the records and they went home, like, that's just kind of where the story ended, you know, on the conversation that I heard. But yeah, I just thought that was great. It was just like, you know, like, oh, they don't like this, like, let's be just obnoxious, like
what they're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, we've all played in screamo bands or whatever, like, we could improvise for 15 minutes, you know. Yeah. They were probably going to go up there and play for an hour, you know, and then they just you know, just go for it for 15 minutes and then call it a night, sell a bunch of records. But yeah, anybody who, like, went home and listened to that record, which I'm assuming was Spine and Sensory or Dream Signals on, like, if it was either one of those records and, like, they went home and listened to it and were mad and broke it or whatever, like, I think those records go for a lot of money now. But yeah, like, but anyway, yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I was just saying, like, you know, I'm not that versed in that, but I do enjoy listening to it. And there are a lot of, like, expectations that people play into, and listening to y'all stuff, it's really refreshing how, you know, sometimes I feel like maybe y'all are playing to them purposely so that by the time you get to sort of a twist or whatever, it hits a little harder. But that's maybe just like an outside perspective. But yeah, you started playing in bands, and like, was it sort of like love at first sight with like making music with other people, or like what was that? Like,
My first show was nerve wracking because
yeah.
I've been singing in choirs, I've been playing in wind symphonies and orchestras and stuff, and that's a very, very different environment. And so like I thought I was used to performance, and then my first show in a band, we were 5-piece, just modern rock band, and my knees were literally shaking the entire set. But I adapted fairly quickly to the point where my bandmates at the time got mad at me for upstaging them.
that's that's an unusual take from like what we're used to now, where it's like if somebody's not going ham, you're like, what's the matter? Like, what,
Yeah.
why weren't you feeling it, or whatever. But yeah, so, you say you adapted pretty quickly. Is that, I mean, the nervousness, I think, like, is one thing. And sometimes, like, I really still get that. But as far as, like, the way that you felt, like, after you played and, like...
Oh, it was great.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, Analecta has been a band since like 2010.
Yep.
So I don't, really know, like, were you in projects before that, were notable? Like, you have recordings online you're still proud of, or anything like that?
So my first, like, what I would consider my first very serious band was 2006 to 2010.
Okay.
And Patrick was also in that. He and I have been playing together for 18 years now.
Okay.
And that band was a fairly chaotic math metal band.
Okay. What was that called?
Dr. Doctor.
Okay.
We had one full length, a couple of EPs. We toured a ton over those 4 years. Got to both coasts, Florida, Texas, all over the country. Broke more vans than I can remember. I think we went through probably 5 vans in 4 years or something.
Yeah.
Just absolutely ludicrous. And after our last tour, because we were 4-piece and I played bass and did backing vocals, after our last tour in the winter of 2009 to 2010, the other two said, hey, we think we've been going hard at this for like 4 years. We need a break. And so in the meantime, Patrick and I were like, well, we're bored. We have another friend whose band just broke up. We're going to have coffee with him and then talk about maybe starting something on the side. And that is how Analecta started. And we just started jamming in, he was our guitar player for the first couple of years, a guy named Kevin. And we just jammed in his basement, and with no musical goals, just kind of whatever happens. And it ended up being post-rock.
2006 to 2010, like I didn't really play show, like I was playing shows like 99 to 2004, like pretty hard, and then I just like didn't play shows for like 5 years. We had our oldest in 2002, and we were just like making our last band, Ikagi. We were just kind of like making that work.
How did I not know you were in Acamelia? Maybe I did know that and I forgot.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of that happens a lot, and then like I don't know how many times I've been chatting with someone here, and people were like, "I didn't know you were in Coma Regalia," or "I didn't know you did Middleman Records," and it's always, like I've made the joke before where it's like the scene in Avengers where Tony Stark's like, "I am Iron Man," like
Right.
it's just like, oh, it's yeah, that was a band that was, it was real special to a lot of people in a small window of time. But then at the same time, there are people that like were, small children when that band existed that tell me that was like their favorite band, and you're like, what? Yeah, it just I don't know. I mean that band breaking up like just. Like, I got so depressed. I fought so hard to make that band a thing towards the end. And this is like just before, like, you're able to just like freely send demos back and forth online to people, like to do collaboration and stuff. And like just before all that. So like, it was like if you didn't know a drummer within a couple hours, like you just didn't have a band, So like,
oh yeah, when we started, we had to get Patrick from Ann Arbor. Like he's from this area, but he was going to college in Ann Arbor, and we're like, but we want you as a drummer.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I have to drive the 3 hours back and forth for practice, but
yeah, we better make it worth our time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, so it's just like it feels weird now because like the main drummer in Coma Regalia, like he lives in Spokane, Washington, and we like make it work, So it's weird. It's just like, yeah, for the last year of that band, it was like not having a drummer. We had like one friend that filled in on a couple shows, one friend that filled in on a show, and then like we had one friend that filled in on a few more shows. And then like weirdly enough, like at the end of Ikagi, we were playing with a drummer who didn't live here, but went to Purdue here, and then was in different bands and stuff. And later I started Body of Wasps with him, but that was like 5 years later, like once he was like at Purdue and nearly graduated. And at that time he was like, yeah, so why didn't you ever ask me to be in Ikagi? And I was like, what? I thought you just were just like helping us out or whatever. So it was just like 5 years of like, apparently like all I had to do was just ask this guy to actually be in the band. But yeah, it was just that end of that band was so devastating for me. Like I just tried really hard to make all these things happen, and there was like all this interest from various places in making this band a thing that went further than any of my bands, and it just all fell apart. So I didn't do bands for like 5 years, and I thought that was like not the end of me writing music, but I just didn't know how to do that without being in bands and stuff like that, So that's a real blank spot for me as far as like bands that were active in Indiana and stuff. And I don't know if Dr. sounds familiar to me because like y'all were on my radar, or if that's just like, yeah, that sounds like a band that would, you know what I mean? Like that sounds like that kind of band. Yeah.
We were a very weird band.
Yeah. I feel like that's the era in not just music, but like in Indiana specifically, like that's the era where like a lot of things were like a lot of sounds were converging and people were
Oh yeah,
trying really weird things. Like a band that comes to mind was Ari Ari. Did you know of that band?
I know of the band. I
Yeah.
don't know that I ever saw them.
Yeah, they were just like they started out kind of, you know, um at the drive-in, more noisy, but like, you
Yeah.
know, Little Horse the band in there for good measure, and ended up just like just going full weird, like, you know, like GS um GSL, like, you know, like kind of label energy. Am I
Right.
saying that wrong? But
It's a gold. What's gold
yeah,
standard
yeah,
anyway?
GSL. Yeah, I said it right.
That's right. GSL.
I don't know. I was thinking of the band, the VSS. So I was like, is the label called GSS? Am I screwing this up? But no, I just had
Nope,
them
you were right.
mixed up. But yeah, and Analecta is primarily you and Patrick, right? So
These days, since mid 2012 ish, it's just been me and him.
yeah, because like I, you know, I like y'all have you've been a band for since 2010, and that's when Gomer Regalia started, and it's like it's wild. There are way more bands now that like are like spanning like a decade or whatever. But like
Yeah.
y'all obviously have like a few years here and there where it's like I don't know if it was just like a conscious break, like, you know, some of it's probably more due to like, you know, obvious reasons like the break between like 2016 and 2022 or whatever that. But has it always just been kind of a project where y'all will get together and work on a group of songs and realize those songs, or is there, you know, a lot of like people moving around and stuff like that, or
We live 2 blocks apart from each
oh,
other.
okay.
He's married with a kid now. I don't have those kind of obligations. Also, he's incapable of saying no and is playing in at least 2 other bands
Yeah.
of different styles because he's in Loon the Band, which is kind of an a depressing Americana band. Um,
Okay.
they're very good, but it's a lot of depression and socio-political stuff mixed in there.
Hmm.
And then he's also the drummer for a ska band called Dad Jokes, and he was scoring ambient music for a modern dance group for a while. He and I also have had 2 other bands over the course of Analecta. We had a hardcore band and a power violence band.
Okay, what were those bands called?
The Stranger was the power violence band, and that one was pretty short lived. And all of our lyrics were about cartoons because my old roommate was the vocalist and had no inspiration for lyrics. So I just wrote some stuff off the top of my head.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say it was like from Camus books or something.
So that's where the name came from.
Right, of course. But no, no,
But the
just
the other
cartoons.
band was about 6 years we existed, and we're kind of talking about maybe trying to bring it back. Called Chin Up, and
Oh,
that
okay.
was more of a started as a posy hardcore band, and by the end of it, it was a much angrier hardcore band. And I fronted that one.
Yeah, I know
Um,
that band.
right.
I didn't know like I didn't know that you were in it, which makes the split that you did with them even more fun. Just like
Yeah, it was just a split with ourselves.
yeah, yeah. Like I've said before, because we have some sort of revolving door members in Coma Regalia. I was like, oh, it'd be fun to do a Coma Regalia split, where it was
Yeah.
just like me, and then like a different drummer and bass player on each, you know, of the sides.
Yep.
Should still do that. Why not? You know,
Yeah, you should still do
you
that.
know, only live once and all that, or only live infinitely, or however you want to look at it. Yeah. Uh, so you're talking about doing some more chin up stuff again?
We just started talking about it in the last couple weeks. I had just posted a random thing on Facebook, and a whole bunch of people were like, "Hey, I really miss that band. You should do it again." And I mentioned it to Patrick, and he's like, "I miss playing hardcore. Let's do it again."
Yeah. Patrick, you're really cementing that, like, Patrick, the yes person idea. Just like, yeah,
Oh
let's
yeah.
do it. Like, I only got 7 bands right now. Like, that's not too much.
Well, that, and he's helping run a community center show space, DIY show space in the area, and he's always busy.
That's awesome.
That being said, we're also gearing up to start working on LP3 for Analecta.
That's awesome. I remember the the that was like a the one show that we played with y'all. Do you remember that?
Well, we played in
Or we might have played more than
Chesterton,
one. Yes, it was Chesterton. Yeah.
yeah.
We might have. I was just gonna say we might have played more than once, but if we did, it wasn't like a show. Like maybe we played like a big.
Oh, are you talking
bigger
about
thing.
the that like fest thing?
Oh, I'm not sure. Did we play a fest together as well? I was talking about the Chesterton
in the same
show.
spot, but yes,
Right,
I think so.
Right. Yeah. And that was like a really. I don't know if Patrick knew this, but that was like a really big deal to me. And I did like specifically, like on Facebook chat or something, like go out of my way to like thank him later. But like the show that we played with y'all, I believe it's a Sound Cellar, and
Yep.
we I did, like, I punched through my bass drum head in the middle of a song, and he just comes in just like, I gotcha, and it just has this bass drum head, and I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I always keep an extra one, one of my old ones, and I'm like, I can just have this, and he's like, yeah, no problem. And I was just like legitimately touched by that, like, because like I know that like DIY is always supposed to be like that, and like it generally is, you know what I mean? But like that was pretty early still in Coma Regalia's like history or whatever, and we hadn't really got out of the state too much or anything like that. So it was really
Right.
like I was really like, yeah, this is the same as it ever was. Like this still means the same thing, because like I don't know if you felt similarly, but like in the early 2010s, like there was just a lot of like party stuff, and like some of the shows that we played, it's like it was just like there were parties and a band was playing. You know what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah, I know that existed. We didn't really tend to venture into that particular part of the scene much.
yeah, I mean, we just kind of got like when we first started, I didn't know anyone, and I felt like I was really starting from scratch. Like everyone that I knew from 2004 like wasn't doing stuff anymore. So it was like we
Right.
just went where we were asked, and a lot of times it was pretty much what I was used to or whatever. But then a lot of times it was just like, oh, this feels different, and
Right.
so just like, yeah, that was like a really big deal to me, and I was just like, oh no, this is still everything I remembered it being, and just sort of like people having each other's backs, and and stuff like that, and it was awesome. But yeah, like obviously a lot of stuff's changed since 2000. I don't know if that would have been like 13, something like
Probably
that.
13.
Yeah, that's when I was kind of placing it in my my brain. But y'all are getting ready to record a new LP then. So
Write it first. We're not recording yet. We have to
oh,
write it
okay.
first.
Oh,
But
writing the
but
new.
like actually making a conscious decision to sit down and put together an LP's worth of songs.
Okay. So it's not like I mean, y'all live just right down the street, but still there could be a lot of like drop boxing or like hey, check out this idea that I had real quick?
So the last 3 songs that we've released were written that way. And we have very consciously talked about we don't want to write like that anymore.
Yeah.
For this band, at least, it doesn't feel as organic or as collaborative for either of us. Because a lot of it's been me writing guitar parts and going, oh, okay, this is great. And then sending him essentially like full fleshed out everything and being like, just add some keyboards and drums and samples or whatever. And neither of us are particularly fans of writing that way. So I am putting together a rig specifically for writing because my full like show rig is way too big to drag around all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to run a laptop with some software, amps and stuff on it, and my pedal board, and just play on. We run full in-ear mixes, so we're just going to write that way.
Yeah.
That way we can still be in the same room. We can still write fully collaboratively, but I can just bring like a rack and my pedal board and my guitar.
And you don't have to. Well, no, because it's live drums. You still have to. It has to be
right. We'll
loud.
still have his
Yeah.
drums, and he's got like a space in his basement, or we can do it at the community center when they're not open because he's got keys to it and can get in whenever. And that's where typically before shows, that's where we'll practice leading up to a show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though. Do you feel like that that setup, do you feel like that decreases like any kind of like fatigue or whatever that you might feel when you're playing for like a couple hours or whatever? Like this that sounds like it's such an old lady thing for me to say, like, but like, do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes, like,
no, I totally
you're
do.
riding and these amps are like super loud for like 3 hours, and you're just like, I'm fucking exhausted. Like, what's the deal? You know? But like,
I don't think I would want that for like 3 hours. As much as like I'm very big on when we play live, I want to rumble people's intestines. Mm-hmm. And all of their organs, but like when I'm writing, I don't want it that way.
Yeah. When we record, like, when Jason and I have recorded like the last few full lengths, like, he'll be here and he'll have the, we'll have the drum kit all mic'd up, and we'll have one channel like where it's just like, yeah, I'm using like guitar rig to just record the scratch guitars that are going into his ear, like,
right.
And it's so much. Like, I mean, I wish we could record live sometimes. Like, I don't think we're necessarily missing any of the energy of recording live. Like, I just wish that we could do that once, like, for the experience of it. Like, because it's been since Inspirata that I've recorded a Coma Regalia album, like, live. Like, because Inspirata was pretty much live.
Right.
But, like, it's just so much. It's just like, yeah, like, I feel bad for Jason because like he's still like physically doing drums for like an entire day, but like
right.
I'm just like chill. I'm like, this is so nice. Like, it's not terribly like my body is like aching, and like all the actual like vibrations of like super loud guitars and whatnot. But yeah, it's it's different. I like it. But I don't get a lot of like, I chat with a lot of folks that are just like their setup will be like overdrive, maybe like reverb and delay, and that's that, right? But people love it when you get a little gear talk in there. So like, you mentioned your rig being like too, like, I'm not lugging all this shit around. So like, what does your live rig look like?
So I have a 612 guitar cab that is actually a 212 and a 412.
Okay.
And I have a 612 bass cab. And then I have a 12 spot rolling rack that has EQ and compression, and then I'm running solid state amp, but it has tube pre's in it. So there are two heads that are dialed very differently, one with boosted mids, one with scooped mids, just for more fullness of sound. One is a Dumble OS and the other is a Friedman BEBB. And then I have a 6-space rack for my bass rig, which currently has a Sans amp, EQ, compression, and a Galen Kruger Fusion 800, but I'm actually swapping out the Sans amp for a dark glass equivalent because it's just a little bit better.
That's
and then
heresy. This is
I know I'm keeping the Sans amp and putting it into another rack with
fair.
a different head just for other uses, but the dark glass is just a little better, but they don't make a rack unit, so it's a pedal. So I'm just going to throw it into the rack. In the back of the rack, there are cab simulator units for both guitar and bass, because we run full linear mixes. And in a pinch, if we were to play someplace that was like, you can't bring your cabs in, we can just run lines out and still get full sound.
Yeah.
It also helps because we have to play to a click because we're so loop heavy.
Mm-hmm.
COVID gave me COVID lockdown kind of stuck me at home for a long time, and so I taught myself basic MIDI programming. So my whole rig is largely controlled by MIDI now, with a foot switch control pedal. So like I turn my loopers on and off, I turn various pedals on and off, all at the same time with like you click one button and it all happens, and I don't have to tap dance while I'm playing.
That is so above my pay grade, but I love it. That's like the kind of stuff that my dad has, like, my dad's like, you know, like, my dad's like one of those old head guitar players that can like rip Crazy Train solos and stuff, and he's been a huge into MIDI and all that stuff since it first started rearing its head in the mid 90s or whatever, you know. I have no idea. I'm lost, but like I love hearing about it. What is your, so like, are you using like a all-in-one like effect board kind of situation? Like, what's that look like? Are you? Yeah, okay. So you do have like the Death Star.
I have a giant pedal board, and I even have I have 5 pedals, 5 mono pedals, because a large portion of my board is in stereo. But I have 5 pedals now in a rack that is controlled by wireless MIDI. Okay. So it'll turn those on and off, and I have I have my reverb. Well, I say my reverb. It's my initial reverb that's almost always on. 2 different overdrives that are dialed in differently, and then 2 Walrus audio pedals that are like soundscape pedals. That's what they consider them, for like doing more ambient stuff. Also, I'm running all wireless because I prefer to not be tied down. Yeah. Also, it enables me to be able to switch instruments a lot easier, so I can put a guitar down, pick a bass up, and click on my wireless receiver, and it'll switch what instrument I'm playing.
Oh, okay. So you do that like during the shows as well?
Oh yeah, and some depending on what our set list is, I also will run a wireless receiver on a synth,
Okay.
and that just runs through my rig,
This is
so I
like
can loop it.
if somebody could be inside my head right now, it's like me like floating in a universe that I don't understand. Like but being impressed by it, like looking around and being like this shit is beautiful, but I have no idea what I'm looking at. But yeah, it's like I've always like I've always like I never know. You can't tell necessarily like how much of this that you're hearing. Like, I just listened to y'all's like, latest single, like, a couple hours ago or whatever. And you can't tell like how much of this anymore is like, what's this sound like live versus like how much of this is done in like post production, or
We
whatever.
try and write as close to what we can reproduce live as possible. We both got a big thing about not having backing tracks. So I want to get as close to the recording as I can, as able to reproduce it live as close as I can.
Yeah. Because like obviously it's 10 years or whatever, and so that's like the huge thing. And just like from 2010 until now, just like the way that we understand like home recording, et cetera, and just like
Oh yeah, Homer, because the last three songs we self-recorded.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say is like your first release feels like, I'm not sure if that was self-recorded, and I don't mean
Uh,
by saying it feels self-recorded, it doesn't. That I don't mean
you
that as an
mean
insult.
the our 2010 demo?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very much self-recorded.
Okay. Well, see, that's
Our friend Nat from Spaceships came in with like a 4-track or whatever, and we recorded it in a basement.
that's awesome. Yeah. So it's just like that. So there's from going from like listening to that, and then like listening to stuff along the way, like you can't, like I can't personally form any kind of like conclusion as far as like, well, the band, like, not that I think there's anything wrong with those first songs, and I actually think that there's a charm to that kind of stuff being
Oh
recorded
yeah,
like less than flawlessly polished, style or whatever.
I prefer imperfection.
Yeah, it's just like you can't take in all this information and be like, well, the band just got better, or the band just got better at recording, or it's like there's so many factors. You're just like, yeah, I'm not sure. Like, so it's hard to get like what does this band sound like, live, but
So
it sounds like you're as close to the finished product as you can possibly be.
tangentially related, when we recorded our last full length, Ashitha, we went to Ohio to record it, and the engineer that we chose, who's a friend of ours, made me play every single note on that record. There was no looping whatsoever. So like all the tremolo picking, everything, and he was like, "You will play every note." And when it was done, I was like, "You know what? This might be how I record for the rest of my life."
Huh.
Instead of trying to fix things, it gives. So I have a degree in graphics and a degree in photography, and what I discovered while I was in college was that I like art that's slightly not right. Like that hasn't been completely glossed over to be perfect. I like the imperfections. And so I feel very similarly about music. And so like if there is that element of human error, even if it's slight in music, I prefer it.
Yeah.
Like if you've gone in post and fixed every note that was just, an eighth of a beat off or whatever, then you're taking away the humanity of it.
Yeah, I actually just am. It's weird. Like I'm really like anal retentive in certain aspects, but then there's like a part of me that's like, I'm not doing all that. Like,
Yeah.
like there's a part of me that like I can't there's, I don't know, just my moods can be so. There's sometimes when I like will feel very relaxed and very at home doing just like editing, like like I'll use a plug-in for the bass distortion on
Yeah.
recordings because I just don't have a lot of luck recording live bass, so I prefer to DI the bass and use a plugin for the distortion. It's like,
Yeah, and I think that's a fully valid way to do it.
and yeah, for sure. And the thing about that is my bass is very noisy, and so when I'm running this distortion, if there's a break where there's no bass, like you're just gonna hear this, and like if it's a solid cut, then I got to go in there and just like actually clip that out. There's like
Right.
obviously, I think most people actually do that like all the time, like for everything. Like if there's a part where this particular drum is not hitting, they'll just cut everything out. And I'm just like, no, oh my gosh, like nothing sounds more nerve wracking to me than cutting out like all then cutting in and focusing in on each individual drum hit and killing everything else. Like nothing sounds, it just like seriously gives me like the heebie-jeebies thinking about doing that. But like
No,
at the same
I'm
time,
with you.
like,
I'm not what I would consider a producer at all, and
Yeah.
that just like no.
yeah, but at the same time, like there's another part of me that's like sometimes like I'll get into those bass tracks and I'm like, this is chill, like just moving these little and doing, but then there's the other part where I'm like, but yeah, it's interesting. Like, what was your engineer like friend's perspective? Was their perspective the same as yours when they said?
I think it was coming from a similar place. I didn't
Yeah.
ask him about it. I just took it as a challenge
Yeah,
at the time, and I was like, "Well, okay, if you want to have me sit here for 15 minutes tremolo picking up, then let's see if I can do it."
yeah. And there's just little like, oh, that one's a little hits a little.
Yeah, and like
Not
most
as-
people will never notice it, but
Yeah.
I will,
Yeah,
and I'm okay with it. I actually like that it's there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's shit that you put down sometimes, and you're like, I mean, I like to do a lot of, I like, I don't know how. I'm always saying that I'm telling on myself on the podcast, and it's true. Like and I'll tell on myself again. But there's a lot of like my playing where I'm just like, oh, I just bullshitted that, and it's just like I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like I like to do a lot of like, there's this part coming up where it's just like, I feel like the rhythm guitar is saying all that needs to be said, but I want there to be something else going on. And so the other guitar will just bullshit it. And it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like just like hammering on like the 12th harmonics or whatever, or just like scratching up and down you're just like bullshitting it. And it's just like,
You're texturing it.
yeah. And sometimes you're just like, I couldn't duplicate that exactly if I tried, And I feel similarly about those mistakes. It's just like, holy shit, Like, have you ever demoed something and then you go to do the real thing and you're like, fuck, this is like better in a way, but what about that one thing that happened sort of on accident? Like that was fucking
Yep.
cool, And yeah, I don't know. It's awesome that we like live in a age where we can have both those things, if only for our personal listening and enjoyment or whatever.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But yeah. So do you do a lot of like you mentioned before, like sort of like how y'all will play just for a long time and then just be like, we dug this, we didn't dig that. Is this all being like recorded? Do y'all just sort of hit
Nope.
record and go for it?
Past putting it into a looper, no. But
No?
I often save my loops if I have, because I'll just sit around at home sometimes and just play. And I have 2 loopers on my board for 2 different uses. Well, it's complicated. I'm not going to try and describe that.
Okay.
But I can store the loops in the memory and offload them onto a computer later so that I don't forget them.
Are you using Jam Man or something else?
I'm using an RC500. Is it a 500?
Okay.
Whatever the mid-size unit of the Boss looper is, which I specifically switched to because it's the only looper I know of where you can pre-store loops, and it's MIDI controlled.
Oh, okay.
Which here's the big Analecta secret. The way that we play loops as effectively as we do is we have everything timed out, and I preset blank loops in my loopers. So there's nothing pre-recorded. It's just blank, but I can turn the loop on and start recording, and it will be the perfect length.
Oh. And you've got a click in your ear, so
Yep.
you're dead on with that. Huh.
So we were doing that back when I was playing on Jam Mans instead. That's when it started.
You could do that on there too?
We kind of, yeah, you could do that on the Jam Man too.
Oh.
At least on the mid-size Jam Mans, the 4-button ones.
Yeah.
And I used those for a long time, and I only switched because they weren't MIDI capable.
I have one of those. I've used it. I used it in concordance with a Ditto.
Okay.
But we were very, like, I don't think that we would have been playing this song when we played with y'all, but there was a song where I would like pop both of those on at different times from behind the drum kit, and we very much were not, those were not recorded to a click. We very much were not playing to a click, and I'd say we had about a 75% success ratio with like staying on those, but it kind of didn't matter that much. Yeah, it didn't matter that much, honestly, because by the time that particular song ended, like I would actually just come out from behind the drum set and all the loops and the other guitar would still be playing, and I would just be crawling around on the floor screaming and crying, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess 75% is not that bad, but let me tell you what, that 25% when it didn't work out, it felt bad.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling.
Because you had a pretty decent window of we're off, but not enough to notice. But then like that other percent where it's like, this is noticeable, probably people that were watching you, it was not that noticeable even, but like you were like, oh, this feels bad. But
oh yeah, I've totally had shows. I've had shows where we get to the end and people are like, that was amazing, I loved it. I mean, in my brain I'm going, that was terrible. Were we watching the same thing?
Yeah. That's this other thing that we could obviously spend a long time chatting about, but like where it's just like nobody, like, it's like I'm really into like the artwork of like children and stuff, right? Because it's like when you look at a piece of art, like you're just looking at it. You have no idea what was in that person's brain and how that differs from what's on the piece of paper,
Right.
And until somebody says something, you're taking that as like, this is what they want to show you. But in reality, like as an artist, everybody is like, well, what I wanted to show you was this, what's in my head in here. But what I actually showed you, which I'm, in most cases still very proud of, is this, and it's different. And like, as artists, like we're always like, there's a way that we're like, I'm okay with how this is different. Sometimes I'm more than okay. I'm glad that this is different. I'm happy. But like,
yeah,
that's like something that we always, I think, take for granted when we're like, when we get those feelings where we're like, were we watching the same thing? Did you hear the same thing that was coming out of this amp? Because it was bad, like, and is that we are just like people are just presented with what they're presented with, and they don't know like that expectation that we have in our head, you know? So it's like,
Right.
I definitely adopted that thing where it's like, I won't badmouth anything, you know, because like, I don't want to diminish someone's, enjoyment of their experience and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well,
not,
there's another thought in there, which is, as the musicians, we are our own biggest critics.
yeah, for sure.
So we're going to notice every mess up that we make, but there's a good chance that no one else will. I mean, there's a chance that the other people in your band won't notice.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully everybody's just having a great time, and that's,
Right.
you know, that's that. I mean, not gonna lie, like when I play a show with like a band like Dreamwell or something, and like, you know, they got like two guitar players that just like absolutely fucking shred. Like I'm like, I
Right.
am the shittiest guitar player that ever like I'm like, you know, but like
I think they're both better guitar players than I am.
yeah,
So
I mean, it's just you roll up and you're like, what am I doing here? But you know, it's hard not to be self-conscious, but like it's like one of those things where it's just like, yeah, like for all anybody knows, like that's your like that's what I came here to play shitty and cry, you know, so that's
yeah.
mission accomplished. But yeah, it's been real cool chatting with you and everything, and I'm excited that, you know, y'all are going to be working on maybe, you know, a lot of new music coming up. Like who knows?
That's the goal. I'm
Yeah.
trying to do a solo EP by the end of the year too. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. What style are you going for there?
Honestly, it changes from week to week. It could be just acoustic singer-songwriter stuff, but with me, there's probably going to start out with like classical guitar based, or at least nylon string based, and possibly acoustic guitar, and then just layer for weeks.
Yeah. So singer songwriter / post rock, like
Sort of. Well, so there's a good chance there's going to be at least a little bit of a grunge element in there.
okay.
Maybe a little bit of shoegaze.
Okay.
We'll see. I
This
The whole thing with doing anything solo is to not have any rules, and so
Yeah.
whatever happens musically, and we'll just see what happens. I don't really have a musical goal for it other than put something out by the end of the year, because the last solo thing I put out was 2015, I think.
yeah, it's it is wild sometimes how you you can give yourself this freedom. You can be like, okay, no parameters, no rules, no whatever. And then like as an album starts taking shape, you let it become a more singular thing, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, the urge to resist that is it's strong, but it's like it's hard to fight once something starts making sense, like as a cohesive unit, to like
Yep.
sort of narrow your field of focus. But I hope you're able to resist that urge, because I want more weirdo shit. I want something that just like, it's like, okay, this is like you said, like, oh, okay, this is just like, this starts out and it's just like classic, an instrumental of like classical guitars and like acoustic, and then in the middle there's like a song that could have been on In Utero or something. Like, okay, that sounds fucking sick. But yeah, it's been a blast chatting with you. I have tried my best to get more folks from Indiana on the show, and
There's a lot of us, all things told.
I know, and it's like I'm always like hitting people up, and you know, like there's one band from Indy in specific that I feel like, okay, they just don't like me, you know, because we haven't made it happen. But yeah, I'm excited to, you know, hear that y'all are still doing stuff, and that you're gonna be, you know, working on stuff in the future as well. But as we wrap up here, is there anything else that we should chat about? Like where should people be following you and stuff like that to, so they can.
Oh boy, I'm so bad at social media for the band, and I'm the one who does that stuff. I did manage to get our entire discography on streaming everywhere this year, which
Okay.
was one of the things, because a lot of it was only on Bandcamp, and I was like, oh, I want it everywhere. I don't care if we make money off of it. It's never been the goal.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to buy it, that's great, but like, I just want people to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, let's see, August. Yeah, I'm trying to actually get a website up and running, because we have a whole bunch of merch, which is ridiculous. I can't help myself. I keep making merch. And so I'd like to get a website up that has, like, our show history and about us, and about, we had, once upon a time there were 3 of us. Now there's just the 2 of us. And at some point I want to do new promos, because I don't look like how our old promos were.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation, probably.
Yeah. I would definitely like to invite you back at some point to have that conversation specifically. But like, if that's something that you're into. But
yeah, I would happily talk about that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, what is the IG or wherever that you would point people to,
Let's
so that
see.
they can find out when the website launches, and then hopefully you'll magically get better at self promotion.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to find what our. Well, I think it's either Analecta or Analecta Band for everything.
Okay.
Typically, if you put us in a search engine, Analecta, if you put in Analecta and Band as 2 separate things, I think we're the only one. We managed to get a name that no other band has.
Yeah, you were the first one that came up when I just did a Google search. So
that's the easiest way to find us. I have a big thing about bands picking band names that already exist.
Yeah, I think
and also our band name is also a joke. So
I think there's a lot of gray area there, like, but like there's some bands it's like there's one that like people keep picking, and it's just like I'm just like, do a Google search real quick, because
right.
It's like, yeah, but like there's one that people keep picking, and it's Standstill, and there's this band from from Spain back in like the early 2000s that were just, I mean, they were just incredible. And like there's been so many bands named that since then, and I'm just like, you can't keep naming your band
gotta pick
that.
something else.
Like, this band is so like they were but yeah, I mean, there's like some bands that I have it's just like, I'm in a band called Bitter Pill, and that band, there's a band called that, but they're like they're like a, they're totally different genre, and they're like they have like, they're like a mom and pop band from like Missouri or something, and they like have like one release of like 3 songs on Bandcamp or something. So it's just like, oh, okay. But like, yeah, it's, like I said, I think I made the joke a while ago, like, I'm going to start a band called At the Driving, and just be like, no, what? It's different, and yeah. Anyway, yeah, just, I guess, just Google Analecta,
yeah,
and
just
find out.
Google Analecta. That's the best way to find us. Yeah. The whole joke in the name is that an Analecta is a collection of literary works, and we are predominantly an instrumental band.
Okay, now I get it.
So the name was chosen as a joke.
Okay, I was gonna ask at some point, was there ever a urge to throw a vocalist into the mix? But
so if you listen to our tape split with Spaceships that came out a couple of years ago, there is a song with vocals on it.
Okay, yeah,
it is the very first song I have ever written for Analecta with intentional vocals.
Well, there it is, and yeah, that's one of those other things where like always down the line, you could just be like, if you ever were wanting to do like a weird remix album, you could just obviously just be like, send your vocal takes, or whatever. But yeah, that's enough free ideas for for the night. Anyway, it was great chatting with you, and like I said,
too.
let's do this again.
Absolutely.
And that was my conversation with Sarah Maloney. Thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to chat with me. Thanks to all of y'all for listening wherever you are as well. Don't forget to go by the Middleman Records IG page, which is middle.man.records, and check out all the records and tapes and zines that we have on sale for just $5 each. Until next time, take care and do good things.